In 1735, a Swedish ship called the Göteborg left harbor loaded with silver. Destination: Canton, China. Mission: bring back tea. The voyage took over a year each way through pirate-infested waters around the southern tip of Africa and across the Indian Ocean. Entire crews died of scurvy, shipwreck, and disease on these journeys. And they did it for dried leaves. That sounds insane, but the fact that people risked everything, nations went bankrupt, wars were fought, and the map of the world was literally redrawn over a plant you can buy for $3 at any grocery store today, that tells you something. Tea is not just a drink. It never was. It all starts about 5,000 years ago in the green, misty mountains of Yunnan, in southwestern China. A wild shrub grew there that nobody thought was special. Legend says an emperor named Shen Nong was sitting beneath that tree while his servants boiled water. A few leaves broke loose, drifted into the pot, and the water changed color. Any sensible person would have tossed it out. Shen Nong tasted it, and he liked it. The story is almost certainly a myth. Shen Nong may not have existed as a real person at all, but the core of the legend lines up with what archaeologists have confirmed. The Camellia Sinensis plant, the single species that produces every tea on Earth, green tea, black tea, white tea, oolong, all of it, originated in that region of Yunnan. And people in that land were chewing tea leaves thousands of years before anyone in Europe knew the plant existed. For centuries, tea was medicine. Chinese texts from the Han Dynasty describe it as a treatment for headaches, digestive problems, and fatigue. They ground the leaves into paste, pressed them into bricks, broke off chunks, and boiled them in water with salt, ginger, and sometimes onion. If someone served you that version today, you would probably spit it out. The transformation from bitter remedy to something people actually enjoyed drinking for pleasure took hundreds of years. But the real turning point came during the Tang Dynasty, which ruled China from 618 to 907 AD. And here enters Lu Yu, an orphan raised by Buddhist monks who developed an obsession with tea. He spent years traveling across China, visiting growing regions, documenting preparation methods. In 760 AD, he published the Cha Jing, the classic of tea, the first book in human history entirely dedicated to this drink. Lu Yu turned tea from a folk remedy into an art form. The emperor was so impressed that tea became a taxable commodity for the first time. The government looked at that and thought exactly what governments always think. If everyone is drinking it, we can get rich taxing it. Buddhist monks had been drinking tea for centuries to stay awake during long meditation sessions. As Buddhism spread into Korea and Japan, the monks brought tea with them. In Japan, tea culture exploded when a monk named Aisai brought matcha back from China in 1191 and promoted it to the samurai warrior class as a tool for focus and discipline. The samurai loved it. And over the following centuries, the Japanese tea ceremony evolved into one of the most refined cultural rituals in history. A master named Senno Rikyu codified the ceremony into its most celebrated form: harmony, respect, purity, and tranquility. The tea room was deliberately tiny, forcing even the most powerful warlords to bow low upon entering. Rank and status were left at the door. Hold that image of silence and reverence, because what Europe is about to do with tea is the exact opposite. Tea flowed along the Silk Road and maritime trade routes until it reached the edges of Europe. The Portuguese were the first Europeans to encounter tea in Macau in the early 1500s, but they treated it as a curiosity. It was the Dutch who smelled the money. By 1610, they were importing tea from China into Amsterdam. And then, in 1662, King Charles II of England married a Portuguese princess named Catherine of Braganza. Catherine was already devoted to tea. She brought the habit to the English court, and overnight, drinking tea became the most fashionable thing a noble could do. If the Queen was doing it, everyone wanted to do it. Within a generation, tea went from exotic foreign novelty to the national drink of England. The British East India Company realized tea was about to become their most profitable product. And that profit motive is where this story drowns in blood. The company had an enormous problem. China was the only source of tea in the world, and China did not want anything the British were selling. The Chinese emperor said the most humiliating thing a trader can hear: China possesses all things and has no use for British manufactures. Britain was hemorrhaging silver, and the imbalance was becoming a national crisis. The solution they found is so vile it sounds like fiction. They discovered something China did want: opium. They started growing poppies in India and smuggling massive quantities into China. By the 1830s, millions of Chinese people were addicted, families destroyed, cities paralyzed. When the Chinese government tried to fight back and destroyed over 20,000 chests of British opium in Canton Harbor, Britain used that as a pretext for war. China tried to protect its own people from a drug epidemic, and the response was military invasion. The First Opium War lasted from 1839 to 1842. Britain won, forced China to open 5 ports, and seized Hong Kong. The Second Opium War followed shortly after with similar results. 2 wars, millions of addicts, territory ripped away, all because of dried leaves in a cup. But the British had another plan running at the same time. They wanted to break China's monopoly for good. In 1848, they hired a Scottish botanist named Robert Fortune and sent him on what may be the greatest act of corporate espionage in history. Fortune shaved his head, grew out a braided queue, dressed in Chinese clothing, and traveled with servants who helped him pass as a mandarin from a distant province. He penetrated the forbidden tea-growing regions of Fujian and the Wuyi Mountains. He spent months studying how tea was processed, learning the secrets of oxidation and firing that the Chinese had guarded fiercely for centuries. He collected thousands of seedlings and seeds, packed everything in specially designed glass cases to keep the plants alive during the voyage, and recruited Chinese tea experts who knew the processing techniques the British had tried and failed to replicate on their own. He brought everything to Darjeeling in the Himalayas and to Assam in northeastern India. Within 20 years, Indian tea production exploded. China's centuries-old monopoly was broken with theft, disguise, and deception. And the cost was not paid by the British. Plantation labor in India and Ceylon was brutal. Workers, many of them Tamil migrants brought from southern India, endured grueling hours for almost nothing. Entire communities were uprooted and transplanted to serve the tea industry. Conditions on many plantations were closer to forced labor than free employment. Sound familiar? Tea repeated with Indian and Ceylonese hands exactly what sugar had done with African ones. Now, across the ocean. North America, the 1770s. Colonists were drinking enormous quantities of tea. But the British Parliament imposed the Tea Act of 1773, which gave the East India Company a monopoly on tea sales in America, with taxes the colonists had no say in approving. On the night of December 16th, colonists in Boston, some disguised as Mohawk warriors, boarded 3 ships and dumped 342 chests of tea into the water. Nearly $2 million in today's money sunk into the harbor. The Boston Tea Party was one of the acts that led directly to the American Revolution. Tea helped create the United States. And it also explains why Americans drink so much coffee. After the protest, drinking tea became a sign of British loyalty. The Patriots switched to coffee as an act of political identity. That cultural shift stuck and never let go. Back in Britain, afternoon tea became a daily ritual for millions. Factory workers in Manchester drank strong black tea with milk and sugar. Lords and ladies drank it from fine china. Tea was the great equalizer in a deeply unequal society. The Industrial Revolution supercharged consumption even further. Tea was cheap, it provided caffeine to endure brutal shifts, and the boiling water needed to brew it killed bacteria that made untreated water dangerous. Some historians argue that tea literally made the Industrial Revolution possible by keeping workers alive. In the 20th century, tea reinvented itself. At the 1904 World's Fair in St. Louis, a merchant was trying to sell hot tea in brutal summer heat. Nobody wanted it. He dumped ice into the cup, and iced tea spread across the entire country. In 1908, a New York merchant named Thomas Sullivan started sending tea samples in small silk pouches. Customers, not realizing they were supposed to empty the pouch, dunked the whole thing into hot water. It worked. The tea bag was born by accident. Tea diversified around the planet in ways nobody could have predicted. In India, chai became the national drink. In Morocco, mint tea became the cornerstone of hospitality. Refusing a cup is an insult. In Turkey, tea replaced coffee as the national drink, and today the Turks consume more tea per capita than any other country on earth. In Tibet, butter tea made with yak butter and salt has been a dietary staple for centuries at extreme altitudes. And around 2010, matcha exploded globally. A Buddhist monastic tradition over 800 years old became an Instagram wellness trend. Today, tea is produced in more than 50 countries. China remains the world's largest producer, followed by India, Kenya, Sri Lanka, and Turkey. Over 2 billion people drink tea daily, nearly a quarter of humanity starting their morning the same way. And every single leaf of that tea, from a high-altitude Darjeeling first flush picked by hand at dawn to a commodity-grade tea bag manufactured by machine, comes from the same plant, Camellia sinensis. One plant, thousands of variations, 5,000 years of history. Tea started as an accident, leaves falling into a pot of boiling water in the mountains of Yunnan. It became medicine, then luxury, then a weapon of empire, then a spark for revolution, then a daily ritual for billions. The cup you brew tomorrow morning connects you to Buddhist monks chewing leaves to stay awake, to samurai bowing to enter a room of 4 tatami mats, to a Portuguese princess who changed the habits of an entire nation, to spies in disguise stealing the secrets of a civilization, to workers treated as disposable parts of an imperial machine, to colonists dumping a fortune into the sea on a December night, to British soldiers in the trenches of World War I boiling water under artillery fire, because when the world is falling apart, you do the only thing you know how to do. You make tea. That quiet drink that feels like the opposite of violence carries inside every leaf 5,000 years of power, theft, war, and blood. And it is still warm in your hand. If this story surprised you, drop a comment below telling me what country or city you are watching from and subscribe to the channel. There are more stories like this one coming, and you are going to want to be here for them.